Everyone.
So let's start. So my name is Pascal Tallarida. I'm working at Jarvis Network, and tonight I will have the pleasure to be the moderator for the last panel of the Monolith Remote Meetup, which is Can DeFi shape up the new financial and the new world economy? So I will let you maybe introduce yourself, Griff, Mischa, and Deniz.
Sure. I'm Griff Green. I work on the Common Stack, and I've worked on a lot of non-profit projects for the most part, and of course I'm most known for working on the DAO with Slockit. I'll pass it to Mischa.
Hi, I'm Mischa. I work at Monolith, and I do computers. Yeah, I'm a web guy who likes doing good things, albeit I do work in a profit-making entity, unlike Griff. Yeah, I'm interested in privacy and sovereignty. I'm going to pass to Deniz.
Hi everyone, my name is Deniz, and I'm the head of ecosystem growth for Kyber network. And I spent 10 years in finance before I kind of discovered Ethereum in 2016 and fell down that classic rabbit hole. And I've been in that ever since, probably being focused in DeFi for the last year, and that's pretty much me.
Great, thanks. Okay, so as I said, the idea tonight is to try to get your opinion on whether or not DeFi can help us shaping the future financial world. So let's start with a first question. I'm pretty sure that everybody here has already used some DeFi protocol. We are all crypto native. We want to make more money with DeFi, but it won't suffice if we want to create a new world economy. So how can DeFi actually harness, how people could use DeFi to protect their wealth, to avoid the depreciation of their assets, to just also gain access to financial opportunities?
So who wants to take that first? Maybe I can just sum it up. I mean, I see DeFi as this completely new, like, Swiss Army knife, where suddenly we have 10, 15 different product categories where we can do what we used to do before, but in a more decentralized way. And I mean, the caveat there is that we're not reinventing finance. You know, I see, oh, this is new and there's like new rules and stuff. I still think we're very much tied to the conventional system, in the sense that, you know, interest is interest regardless of whichever platform is on. So I think, you know, we have these amazing new tools for hedging our risk and hedging our assets, but at the end of the day, still as an individual, you have to decide what is your risk level and how you see the economy that we're in and how you're going to hedge towards that. So I don't think in decentralized finance there's a completely new way of hedging. It's still taking a long view or a short view. You can lend, you can borrow. It's still going to depend on you. But yeah, it's a new decentralized toolkit for how you might want to think about, you know, protecting your assets from depreciation.
Great.
No.
Mischa.
I mean, I think just to chime in on what Deniz said, we're still, from an end user perspective, delivering the same products people are used to. It's like, here's something which resembles an account you can spend, and here's some things which you can borrow based on your assets. And I guess what's exciting about this world is the fact that it's more transparent. And even if you're not sophisticated enough to be able to look at the system and see where the issues are, other people will be, and people are looking at this stuff. And people are looking at how the systems are working. We can see that people are abusing these systems, or, you know, so over time, the theory is that will all iron itself out, and we'll have a more transparent and more interesting financial platform to build on top of. I guess that's what I'm going to say to that.
Yeah, and I mean, okay, I'm going to roll it into the next question because I have the questions in advance. Because I feel like like you guys are saying, what we're building with DeFi is just the same stuff that people are already using. The cool thing is that it's decentralized, that it's transparent, because you don't have to give up your custodianship to do a lot of these things of the financial pieces. So what's the next question is like, CeFi issues come from human greed. How does DeFi get rid of the problem? And I would say it doesn't really, but it does get rid of some problems around custodianship and opportunities for these centralized financial institutions to steal money from us, right? But what's cool is we still need CeFi. Not everyone wants to be their own bank. That's ridiculous. Like, there's a reason we have like the division of labor. It's nice not to have to do everything ourselves. So some people are going to want to have somebody else steward their funds. So, but wouldn't it be great if that was an option? If we had DeFi on the bottom and then centralized finance on top of that? I think that's what we're moving towards. Pascal, maybe you want to.
Yeah, just to bounce on what you said, that DeFi might be a copycat of the real financial system. And as we said, yeah, the claim that CeFi has been done by humans who are greedy, who makes mistakes, so probably DeFi might inherit from the same issues. But because DeFi is transparent, but also entirely programmable, can we envision also not just a copycat, but something new? Maybe we can use crypto economics or game theory to create new incentives and to make something more sustainable. What would be your take on this new thing? Like, not to make a copycat, but to use new things to make a more sustainable system.
I guess the problem is, like, before it's invented, it's so hard to kind of picture what it looks like. So anyone who was in the 1990s could never picture what the internet in 2000 would look like. We just had no idea. We had no idea of some of these concepts that were going to come and become so pervasive throughout our societies. So I think there are new things are going to come out, but it's so hard to tell exactly what it's going to look like, what is going to catch on, what is going to be that spark. It's so hard to tell right now. Maybe that's why right now we're still building the building blocks of the lending, the borrowing, the exchanges. So we're just laying the groundwork for that next level that's going to be like a maybe mix match of these different things that has a completely new way of protecting your assets, just to tie it back to your question.
Yeah. If we're thinking, so the centralized systems are based on greed, and how can we stop that? And how can we build stuff in a better way? I think the fact that it's programmable money, like you said, Pascal, and for the most part, most of it's open source, you can fork and build and change. And hopefully that means that the system will become fairer or, more balanced. I think as it stands, it does feel like it's, for the most part, built on greed. Where my head is at with all these things, and I think in the previous panel, people were talking about anonymity and stuff like that, which has a very important role to play in the world. But I think what I would like to see is more real world use cases of finance, like loans and borrowing and lending, but for the acquisition of houses or food or real world things. And I think that might help bring new use cases to the table. Because at the moment, the use cases for lending and borrowing is all about leveraging your crypto to buy more crypto to make more money with the crypto. And it all just seems a bit, not very appealing to mass bigger audience.
I'd say that the financial markets were all about the greed of credit for that, but initially financial markets were aimed to support the economy, actually, but then we affected them. You're not afraid if tomorrow DeFi is not a niche anymore, and we have some monopolistic huge protocol or DAO or company, and a lot of people actually that came in DeFi and do a bit like what we have done with Bitcoin. After all, Bitcoin was a cool invention, but now it's actually a very speculative market. So it looks like we have lost a bit, of the initial dream. So
I mean, I'm really worried if a lot of people come into this space. I don't think we're doing our due diligence and treating it like the public good that we're creating. I mean, this is very clear in the BZX fiasco with flash loans recently, where it's like, and you see Curve Finance, you see these other projects that are launching way too early, and we have, oh, am I frozen?
No, go ahead.
People are launching their product too early, forgetting that anyone can just come in and use it, and it's also a Lego that other people are going to build on top of and integrate with. It's like building a really crappy bridge over a river, and just being like, oh yeah, it's it's a nice shortcut if you want to use it, but beware, and then of course somebody brings their like pet elephant across the thing and it falls and they get hurt, and it's like, oh, it's not my fault,
But that's the cost of fast innovation, though, right? I mean, how long did it take us to get DeFi to this place? Maybe like a year of really intense, but those seeds started 2 years ago, 3 years ago, but nothing existed before then. And we already got like, let's say $1 billion under value, and we have like dozens of projects like coming out. And well, the risk that you mentioned there is that we're starting to combine these different kind of primitives without understanding the risks in each one of them and thinking we have this kind of risk understanding that we do understand, but I don't think we do understand it. It doesn't reflect the actual risk involved in there. And that's why you end up with interest rates that is like 0.5%, whereas I can get treasury bonds, which is 1,000,000 times safer than getting ETH, because I don't have the smart contract risk, I don't have the protocol risk, I don't have regulatory risk on the treasury side. So yeah, but it's growing pains. I think it will yeah.
I think that we need to recognize that this is public infrastructure. This is not a website. It's not something we can just make a pull request and then change everything. This stuff is hard to change, and it's freely accessible. And so I'm excited to see tools like CAD and other simulation tools come out where people can create open source simulations of their little piece. There's a great simulation of Uniswap that someone else forked for their own purposes. And then if everyone created their own little simulation, CAD simulation, we could piece them all together before you launch the product, and then run 10 million simulations and look for the crazy flash loan thing. Look for the random thing that you wouldn't have even imagined that just happened by chance, that one, in the like 5 millionth simulation. And this is how engineering is done. I'm a chemical engineer, and I actually designed power plants back in the day. And we would work for 2 years designing a power plant before we'd build anything that anyone would ever see. We wouldn't even strike ground. And I feel like this is the maturation of this space, is to take it into more of a token engineering opportunity. This is an opportunity that we have, is to take our engineering a lot more serious before we start launching things.
But this is quite optimistic. Like, I mean, to expect developers and people to build such a way. Maybe if we do it in a opposite way, and if we try educate user, or what we should do, because if we fail by people building this ecosystem to make it more resilient, to wait before to launch something, then we have to help the user to don't take a risk on some. So education might be super important.
Education isn't. If we don't do this, then we're going to get shut down. I know that's just the case. We are not creating a public good. We're creating a public bad. So we need to do this so that we don't have people targeting us when they lose a lot of money.
Yeah. Although on the flip side, I feel like we're the guinea pigs here. Like, everyone who goes and creates a CDP is basically playing with the bleeding edge of innovation, and we're here because we want to be here. And it's highly risky. There could be a bug. So thank God right now that pool of people is kind of small and manageable. And if it does blow up, okay, we're going to go on crypto Twitter and analyze it. But that's the damage. It's more contained. Maybe that's how it should be until we mature, until everyone does their audits, and until we build up a bit more fundamental understanding of decentralized finance.
I guess, yeah, I think there's this tension which we're talking about here, right? It's how quickly should we move? How well can we enable, I don't know, the Haydens of the world to build Uniswaps and stuff like that, by themselves, and at the same time realizing that we have to move slowly, and this is public infrastructure. And I guess that balance, with hindsight, maybe you can say that this is what we should have done, but it's always going to be hard. In a world as fast moving as tech.
Okay, so let's say we succeed to solve those issues from each side, users and developers. Let's say that now, 5 years from now, DeFi actually has a lot of more traction, more users. Here comes, for me, another problem. It's self-custody. So it will be a question basically in 2 points. So the first one is humanity ready for self-custody? I mean, it could decrease the risk of criminality. You know, people can come in your apartment to ask for your private key. And also, will people be able to manage their finance themselves, or will they need actually managers or DAO maybe to help them? Or so, first question maybe about self-custody.
I mean, go for it.
No, I mean, I was just gonna say, I think it's a scale. It doesn't have to be like people who want to self-custody have the option to self-custody. If you want some more ease of usability, there's Argent and a dozen other wallets. And then there's simple Coinbase as well. So that you have, like, based on whatever is your needs, there is something kind of out there. Will
So
people...
Deniz, do you imply that for the growth of DeFi, we might need a non-custodial application, but for the wallets, for users' wallets, to allow non-self-custody your asset?
I mean, I was just saying it depends on an individual level, and it doesn't have to be full self-custody or no custody. You can always have these systems of backups so that even if you do lose of that custody, somehow you can recover it, even though it's not like pure custody. It can't be stolen, or you're adding the extra friction before you actually lose your custody. But I mean, I agree. It's a huge problem, like one of the major challenges that we face, that if you lose your seeds, it's done, it's gone.
Well, I mean, it doesn't have to be, and I guess you must be thinking about this stuff as well, Pascal, given that you're well familiar with contract wallets and you're building on top of the Gnosis safe stuff. But I guess the thing which I battle with a lot is, how decentralized do you need to be DeFi, right? And I guess I was on this panel in DevCon with the Argent guys and with the Gnosis guys, where we were talking about contract wallets. And I think it's moving the conversation away from addresses and private keys to real world ownership. And I guess at the moment, I have no model to do that without some form of centralized entity there. But how do we do it? And I can imagine a world where a contract wallet, I mean, for example, ours, where a user can opt in to have some sort of kind of recovery mechanism based off their ID, because we KYC our users as well in order to interact with real world finance. And giving users the option to do that, or to allow users to opt out of it and use their ledger for their recovery tools. I think it's a lot harder conversation than custody means that everything is a private key and only a private key. And at what point does something not be decentralized anymore? And I guess these are things which we toy with a lot internally. There's models. The Argent guys have models like their friends, and the Gnosis is, a multi-sig. And I think would a user holding their funds in a contract wallet, which had a U-port as an organization, for example, being the people who are identity experts, or ident3, I don't know, somehow ident3 being someone who can state, this person is who they claim to be based on the credentials which have been verified elsewhere, and to be able to help users release their funds if they lose their keys. And I think, what is decentralization, or how decentralized do you have to be a part of DeFi, is something which I'm very interested in.
Yeah, I mean, it's always going to be a spectrum, right? Decentralization is a spectrum, and it depends on your application. Like, is self-custody a viable model? I think it should be considered a viable model for certain situations. Your identity, I mean, like, you hold your ID card. I have my passport. Should I be trusting my passport to other people? I mean, why? But maybe a ticket to a movie. I was talking to a blockchain organization that's doing ticketing. It's like, there's no reason to make it the default for them to have custody of this ticket that's being issued by a central authority anyway. You know, it's like, just make a stupid wallet that is barely safe or whatever. If someone wants to move that NFT to something they can control, that can be the next move, right? For the power users that care. But if someone just wants to go to a concert, they just want to go to your website and buy the ticket, they probably don't need custody of it. So it depends on the application. But what's great is that in DeFi, this is an option. We can even have this debate. But there's no other digital, like, what other, where else do we even have custody of our funds in the digital space? Like, or custody of anything. We don't own anything digitally.
I mean, this is why, for me, just last thing on that, this whole space is so exciting. I think someone who grew up in the 90s and born in the 80s, I like, you know, all of that cyberpunk fiction and, you know, the virtual world stuff. I think this kind of connection of the virtual world and the real world through tokenization is just so exciting. And if we can't make custody a real thing, I think the world will push us towards it. I think people will want it.
But if we look at the history, we moved the custody of our money into banks, so we don't have to take care of it, and also maybe for security reasons. Like maybe you prefer that the bank is being robbed rather than your home. This specific aspect of self-custody doesn't worry you for the future. Like, are you okay to hold $1 million, to self-custody $1 million? If I give you $1 million.
I mean, I don't have $1 million. I wish I did. I think this is why a plain old address isn't good enough for these types of things, because I mean, since joining Monolith, you know, I've got access to keys which can move lots of money around, and you know, I have a ledger in my house, you know, and it kind of lost my mind before I went and stuck it in a bloody safety deposit box. I was waking up in the middle of the night going, like, is it still there? Or do I remember the PIN? And this isn't normal, and this isn't where the world should be. And this is why I think there will be a spectrum between how non-custodial or how self-sovereign finance will be. And I think for people like us, we might be happy squirreling away private keys and, you know, having a second auth somewhere. But for the most people want to just pick up a phone and be like, yeah, it's me. I'll answer some security questions, and yeah, let me recover my account, please. And this is why I think about this tension between self-custody or not. And no, I don't want to hold lots of crypto on a private key in my house.
And the second part of the question was, okay, so let's say self-custody is a thing, but also then self-banking, self-investment. So I'm pretty sure that you are aware about PyDAO, which has been announced like I think a week or two ago, even more, where actually DAO can help people to allocate their assets in different ways. Robo-advisoring in the traditional fintech is also a good trend. So I guess, I mean, we can't envision a DeFi for everyone without those kind of management solution. What's your take on that, on DAO managing funds of other users or advising users' funds?
Can you say that again? DAO managing?
Yeah, like PyDAO as an example. Or let's imagine that you put your funds into a DAO, and the DAO is voting on a different allocation of assets. Like,
wait. Can you just say it like slower? DAO, like a DAO?
DAO. Oh, yeah, DAO. Sorry. Yeah.
Okay. Just making sure that I'm on the same page.
Okay. DAO.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's important that we have a self-custody option, because what I'm excited about is not necessarily decentralizing this economy, but decentralizing economies in general. You know, if we're living within this like major market economy, we are so limited in what we can do and what we can create economic systems for. You know, like there's no, I'm from the nonprofit space, and nonprofits are getting screwed by this economy. I don't want to be part of this economy if I want to create value for a community. So I want to see more economies themselves. And if we rely on someone else's custody, if we rely on somebody else's system, then we can't build our own systems. We have to be able to build our own systems from scratch. We need to be able to decentralize the economy itself and have multiple economies that we live with. We already live within multiple economies. You don't, like, value is given to you and your family. If you go to your mom's house and she makes you dinner, she's not going to charge you $10, right? There's a different economic system there, where it's a gift, a culture of giving, right? And a gift economy. And there's lots of other economies that are out there within different, that you are a part of. And now there's Bitcoin, Namecoin, Ethereum, and all the tokens on top. These are all separate economies that have their own value creation system and incentivization system. And so to really like have that's what I'm excited about. And we need self-custody. We need the ability to build this stuff up in a permissionless way to build these new systems.
I think he answered yes to your question, Pascal.
Yes. Okay. So no more opinion about how DAO or how we could drive innovation to basically to manage money better than a bank can do for normal people.
So I'm going to answer this slightly differently. I have no finance background, and I'm literally the world's worst person with money. But I can write good code, I think. I think when I look at the system and I see how much money, how much of my tax dollars goes to armed forces, for example, I get really fucked off. And if I look at what my bank is investing in order to give its shareholders profits, I get really fucked off. And I think some sort of DAO-based thing, maybe in the future, will be interesting. I think in a transparent system, I'll be able to look at like-minded people, or look at experts or economic experts who believe in similar types of economic principles as I do. And I should be able to see what they're building and be able to get behind it. And even just copying it. Like, again, I'm not as sophisticated in trading or anything like that, but my understanding is if you go to like an eToro or some crap platform like that, where the masses are, most people are just tracking a few traders anyway and copycat on what they're doing. And you will end up having, and this is one of our colleagues talks about this a lot, you'll end up having kind of spaces where this is a space where people invest their money in green tech. Here's a space which is really hyper-local focused, and it's hyper-local focused in East London, where I live, which has got, economic tensions there because it's a very newly gentrified neighborhood. And these things will start appearing, and because of the transparent nature, and maybe they're powered by DAOs, I don't know, I'll be able to go look at it and go, yeah, I can see what yield it's getting. I can see the reasoning why these people are proactively putting their investments in this space, and I should be able to go and choose. At the moment, I have no choice, right? And it's so complex and so derivative on top of derivative that I have no idea what's going on.
Yeah, you don't even need a DAO for that. You can go to set protocol. You can go to DeFi Zap, take out a Zap. I mean, all those are like okay, it's very early days. It is being built out. But imagine that in 5 years' time, it's not just these 10 kind of things you can hedge with. It's 110, and now we have the real estate stuff coming on. So, it's going to be up to the individual. What kind of risk profile do you want to take? Because we say hedge from depreciation or whatever, but that has a different meaning for different people. But whatever it is, there will be a finely tailored DApp or app or whatever on Ethereum probably, or anything else where you will be able to solve that exactly as you want it, instead of having to pay the fees, instead of having to do KYC, instead of all the millions of friction points we have in the conventional world.
I just hope people are thinking about this stuff. So I see the real estate thing coming online, and I can see, at the moment it's Detroit, and I don't know much about Detroit.
So,
yeah, I don't know much about Detroit, but if there's like tokenized real estate in London, it would just shoot the prices of London real estate up even more, and there'll be more destitute people out there. There'll be more people out there who are doing our deliveries now that we're in lockdown, who won't be able to afford, our nurses won't be able to afford to live in London. They can't do it now anyway. And that kind of scares me. I just hope that these types of conversations are happening somewhere. Because otherwise it just smells of greed.
Okay, right.
I mean, just on this topic of greed and some things being, valued and some things not being valued. I mean, if it's a private or a club good in the economic goods, right? If it's something that you can restrict access to, then it has value in this economy. If it's something that you can't restrict access to, like let's say affordable housing in London, that's something that right now we don't have an economic solution to provide that value. Right now we don't have it, but we have to rely on a government and their good graces for them to like enforce some sort of creation of value in that sector. But we are building new economies. We can take any value that we want to incentivize. We can think outside the box, and we can find a way to create affordable housing in London with a token economy. I firmly believe that. I know it sounds crazy, but this is what economies are for incentivizing value creation. And so we need to start taking DeFi out of this like, oh look, I'm rich so I can make more money, and start applying it to building the economies we want to see.
Yeah, I guess just the last thing on this. Sorry, Pascal. I think we all know that our governments are just do short-term thinking. They don't think past their election. Their 4 years, and they just want to get their next election and just go through it. And it's very hard in that model with those incentivizations to do long-term planning. I think we should be thinking about these and having these conversations, especially the people building the foundational building blocks for these systems.
Could you imagine if the bureaucrats within governments were incentivized to make good decisions or disincentivized to make bad decisions? Like in a for-profit company. Right now, they have no skin in the game. Like you said, their only incentive is to get to the next election and maintain power the best they can. So,
I guess this is why we have civil servants, but their powers are being taken away from them day by day. Yeah.
And they also have no real direct skin in the game. Like if they're making decisions, if they make a really good decision, they collect their salary. If they make a really bad decision, they collect their salary. This
drives us back to one of the first question, like which kind of game theory we could use to really make. DeFi has to help to make a better economy. So I think this also sounds very good, this idea. I just want to bounce on what you said about not real estate, but when you were speaking about in London. So obviously, the real estate, tokenized real estate, might compete with the real estate, which is not digital. Like DeFi can compete with bank. What's your take on that? Like, is DeFi able to take market shares, or is it just something to fill a gap? Because it's cool that we can create incentivized model, but what for? Is it for everyone, or is it just to fill some gaps that the bank will leave to us?
I can say something on that. Like, I actually really had this dream that real estate, because one of the biggest problems is that real estate in London is an investment opportunity, right? It's not just a home. It's not about the value of living in it. It's that there's some dude in some random country who thinks that real estate is going to go up. So he wants to diversify his assets and own it, right? And if we have virtual assets that are not attached to, life or death situations like having a roof over your head, then maybe the price of homes would be reduced, because there would be another opportunity for that random guy in some random country to park his money in something that's not so important.
Buy Bitcoin.
Yeah, buy Bitcoin instead, dude. Number go up over there too.
Let's say something.
I don't know. Maybe I'm thinking of it from a technical point of view, and I don't know if it's even competing in the sense that in the real world you record the owner somewhere, and then in blockchain you found another way to record that data. At the end of the day, it's still about registering data. So if assets are going up, I don't know if DeFi has any impact on it. It's just market equilibrium. It's demand and supply, regardless of whether it's through a token or whether it's in a sheet in some government department. So I don't know. I think if we carry it over, I think it's just going to reflect what already exists in the conventional system. But obviously, it's much more liquid. It's much more transparent. And all the other stuff, the benefits that comes with being able to hold it in a token form and send it instantly, you know. But yeah, I mean, I don't know if it's going to slow down market prices. Yeah, that's my take on it.
Thanks. Mischa wants to add something before to move forward? Or? Perfect. Okay, so let's try to speak a bit about the, let's say, actuality. So we had some issue a few weeks ago. Let's call it the Black Thursday. So okay, DeFi create a new better economy. We can incentivize people to create better things and to don't act bad. Yet we can have issue. And as example, last time we have this big drop down on the traditional market as well as the crypto market. The way on the traditional markets to stop a market building is just to pull out the plug. Basically, that's all. We can't do this, obviously, in DeFi. How we could prevent or how we can protect ourselves when such kind of events arrive, because we both know, I mean, we know they will still keep arriving, right?
I can let you guys go first.
I'll say something real small to this. So I think I was sat in my house on my computer and my prices were crashing, and I thought to myself, and that whole day the network had been clogged, yeah, and it had definitely been attacked. And I thought to myself, oh yeah, I remember from Maker, like that must mean there's some cheap ETH out there. And I started looking around, and I was like, wait a minute, someone's doing this. And there's like a few hackathon projects like Dice Stats, and there was another one which just had all of the liquidations going through, all of the whatever they were called, auctions. I was like, hey, wait a minute, these auctions are going in at zero. And I was like, nah, someone's thought about this before me. I think the scariest thing for me in all of that is the network and the fact that it was so easy to DDoS, because someone knew that this was going to happen, and someone knew that they could just kind of rank the price of gas up and get their transactions through, and no one else would be able to get it out. And that really sucked, actually. I know that there's work on future ETH enhancements. I'm hoping that moving away from mining to staking will mean that there could be more people validating this stuff, or there'll be more bandwidth within the system. But that was awful, actually. And I don't even think it's like nothing to do with MakerDAO. I mean, like, the Oracle thing, I think, was also beside the point. I think that was a minor thing, and that will get better. And everyone knew, I'd never studied MakerDAO, but, in the back of my head, I was like, oh, wow, there's going to be some auctions going on. So people would have known that. I guess it was just the ease at which the system could be DDoS like that. It was pretty scary to me. Yeah.
So you don't think we could prevent this? I mean, it's like fatality. Yeah.
I see it as a stress test that we did okay with, because at the end of the day, the problems that did show up are problems that do have solutions at the end of the day. And we still have to have in mind that we're still on ETH 1.0, which is kind of clunky, and it has 15, 17 transactions per second. It's limited, it was never like built for this high frequency kind of needs. So, okay, it seemed to do okay. Like some people lost their funds, unfortunately, but we know that ETH 2.0 is on the horizon. And I mean, okay, we're not ready for prime time mainstream adoption anyway. So in that sense, it was nice to kind of just, taser the system and see what comes out of it. And we saw there was a hiccup here, there was a hiccup there, but overall it seemed to be okay, given that the crash was like, 50, 60% at some point. I mean, it was incredible. And for me, like, it seemed okay. And it's part and parcel of being on this kind of new kind of platform where things are done differently than the conventional world.
Yeah, I got a lot of things to say. So
we have just a few minutes, so try to.
Okay. Well, number one, I was on the White Hat Group team that audited MakerDAO, and there were backups on this stuff, and it was pretty well designed. However, there were huge mistakes. The Oracle issue and the lack of people who were acting as keepers caused major problems. And but the thing is, DAI was protected by the MKR token holders, right? And the MKR token holders took a huge hit. There was inflation. And I think that's a pretty well-designed system, honestly. I think that they did a really good job at recovering from a horrible situation. And it's not surprising that we're seeing some horrible situations happen when it's beta products on top of beta products. I mean, the only thing that's legit in the space is Bitcoin. That's it. Thank God Bitcoin is trying to be so legit, right? We will not.
You just triggered so many people now.
Dude, oh, good. Be triggered. Dude, it's beta. Ethereum is in beta, and the projects you're using on top of Ethereum are in beta too. You got beta squared, man. Like, watch out. Things are not safe out there. I mean, I know this because, like, I've been part of so many problems, you know, and have helped people out and have seen things happen, obviously, to the DAO and my own projects. So maybe I'm biased. Maybe I just see all the problems, right? But in the end, I also see some solutions. The biggest problem with that market tank was that nobody wanted to buy. It wasn't like everyone was selling, right? We have this weird two-sided market thing that determines the price of assets, where you need buyers and sellers. And the price is emergent out of some magical liquidity that proposes itself in a marketplace. And we can do better than that. We have these things called token bonding curves. And I know it's crazy. Oh my God, I can't describe it in 2 minutes, right? But we can basically, when the token is created, a little bit of money is held in a smart contract that collateralizes the token's value. So that in a situation like this on Black Thursday, where the nobody is there to buy, the smart contract can act as the buyer of last resort. It can be like an economic parachute in a complete free fall situation, like we saw last 2 Thursdays ago. So like we are starting to build tools for these problems, and it's really exciting. Like the DeFi space has a lot of opportunity to rethink the way that we are creating markets, and I'm stoked to be in it. And for sure, Deniz, like Kyber network, major player, you know, token, yeah, absolutely, man. And token card, bringing people in, normal people, so they can actually use this stuff, right? Like there's so many little pieces and everybody's doing their part to make this system work. So it's, yeah.
That's great. Regarding this token with a bonding curve, it could be applied only to new token that you want to create. Like we can't reuse this logic for Ether or for DAI as example. Right?
It might be difficult to do it for Ether, but it's not impossible. I mean, this is open source code, right? If there was consensus within the network, we could do it on Bitcoin, okay? It's not crazy. We can change the clients. Nothing's impossible. It's just code.
So don't you see that it could be an issue that Ether against DAI or dollar listed on centralized exchange actually won't have those kind of protection. And even though if you have all those protection in DeFi, we might be, you know, like...
well, you would have an arbitrage opportunity.
Yeah.
So free fall might happen in the secondary market, and then it'd be like, oh, wait, I can go to the bonding curve and buy in here. So there would be a natural, still there'd be this upward force.
What was your view on it, Pascal? Given that I guess you're more money literate than me.
I try to don't give opinion tonight, but I'm maybe more into the side of Griff. That arbitrage actually has I mean, every kind of financial market needs arbitrages, of course, and they are let's say it's something. It's the most important thing, I guess, that exists for me. It's liquidity, arbitrage. So.
Yeah.
Okay, great. I think we can push a bit more. So there was this thing that DeFi. I don't know if you have some anecdotes. If you have successfully convinced your relative to invest or whatever. But on my side, it's the first time of my life that I convinced my friend and my family to actually make an investment. So it looks like DeFi makes finance more sexy, more accessible, but we are not all equal in the world. There are some countries with some bans and so on. So, okay, in one side it's more accessible, but unfortunately we still have to live under the ban on some countries and some politics. How we could get rid of this kind of thing so it's completely accessible?
I mean, custodianship helps a lot. There's an amazing project called Grassroots Economics that has, I think, over 10,000 users from small villages in Kenya that are using dumb phones, like normal feature phones, not smartphones, to move to move local currencies that are balanced to each other with bonding curves, and they're using this stuff to buy eggs and tomatoes. Okay, they're using this stuff within their local communities because it solves a problem. Like, it doesn't matter what, if you're like, oh yeah, hey, how do we make this work for people? No, man, that's never gonna work. Your scope's too big. You need to find a small group of people and solve the problem for them. If I'm talking to my grandma, you know, I don't have any problem. There's nothing I can solve for her. It's just that I don't have, like, oh, I could try to convince her the DSR is a great idea, right? Not gonna happen. First off, it's 0% anyway right now. I don't have anything to stand on. So, like, you got to find someone to solve a problem. If you solve a problem, they will beg to use you. It's got to be a problem they see, right? And if we can have small villages in Kenya using this stuff, then with their feature phones, then we can have any of this.
I can go on this now. Deniz, would you want to?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I think the dream of the unbanked is the sexy one. The people who've got, I think, I'm half Iranian and my compliance guy's going to kill me now for saying this stuff, but there's like oppression happening in the world and opinion happening in the world, which means that Iranians don't have access to real world assets or hard currencies. And like, to be honest, like, my product would go down a tree in Iran. And it's not even their government who's oppressing them. It's like another government who's oppressing their government, who's oppressing them. It's on like multiple levels. I think what's sad about what I'm doing is I'm building stuff for the overbanked as opposed to the unbanked. And that kind of, kind of sucks a bit. I think the only way I can see through this, and this is whatever rose-tinted glasses or whatever you want to call it, is if we can get to a place where enough people enough of the overbank are cutting out all these intermediaries which pull the strings globally, which mean that they don't want you to be able to send money between X and Y countries. If that infrastructure gets turned down through decentralization, through being able to send tokens across the world instantly, secured by a chain, I think only then would there be kind of pressures for the others to start using it as well. But again, I think I'm just building a narrative which suits my predicament.
Yeah. I mean, I think even the overbank can sometimes require it in times of crisis as well. I'm from Cyprus, and in 2013 we had a financial crisis where for the first time in Europe, it wasn't a bailout, it was a bail-in, which means that your first 100,000 euros worth in the bank was insured. Everything above it was taken away. There was two scenarios. Either 40% was taken away if you were in one bank, and in the other bank, you had all of it taken away. So I know, we say, oh, black swan events, it's never going to happen to me. My money is safe. But it's so, what I've realized, and together with this virus, is that, life is more precarious than we think. Anything like black swan events can happen without you even knowing it. I thought I lived in a Western world, and to have the banks shut on a weekend, to see ATMs queue outside was like surreal to me. You think okay, it happens in other places, but not to my country. But it definitely happens, and that's where crypto is an alternative. I'm not saying DeFi right now is, but the way we're going at some point is going to be a very powerful tool to actually store your wealth and decide how much of it you want to expose to the kind of conventional, world. But,
I guess just the flip side of this is we need to figure out how we do all the other things which the banking system does. Like, how are people going to get mortgages? How are small business owners going to take loans? How is all that stuff going to happen? And I don't think we have a good narrative there yet.
Yeah, and I think there's also another thing that's probably worth mentioning is that if we do move to this hyper crypto-sized world, like people say hyper Bitcoin, but let's say it's Bitcoin, Ethereum, whatever, and the dollar isn't used anymore, I don't think that decreases the chances of a financial crisis. I think just the opposite. Right now, at least, the government, good or bad, you could argue, has the option to inject $2 trillion worth of liquidity to a situation that seemed like it was going down the drain, and economically. No, with Bitcoin, it's so rigid. You know, the monetary policy, kind of the same for Ethereum as well, that you don't have any tools to counteract any kind of structural crisis you might have in crypto. But this is just probably 15, 20 years down the line, but it starts now, I guess.
I think it's really interesting and an important point. If you look at, I'm again going to say stuff which people might not agree with. At the moment, this printing of money, which the governments have had to do to make sure that people who can't work from home, like us, and who have jobs which are precarious, get money. I think the people who get impacted by that are the people who own assets. And in times of a crisis, fuck those people. And I'm sorry to say this. Like, I don't give a shit that your $1 million house is like not worth as much anymore because the government's printed money, because they're actually saving lives. And I think we need to start thinking about how all of this stuff works together. And yeah, I don't have answers, but I think you.
I know some country, Mischa, that might be disagree. Like inflation might have an impact. But I have a last question for you, which is quite philosophical. I mean, not philosophical, but I got the idea when you start to speak about the narrative, Mischa, but yeah, we actually don't do anything for the unbanked, we do things for the overbanked. Are we not actually redoing the story like us, white people from rich country, wants to do the new world economy, but actually, you remember this tweet of someone who said, everybody wants to do something for the unbanked, but who have ever met it? And isn't it a problem that actually it looks like it's, again, the small group of American, European, and Asiatic people who wants to do the future of DeFi? Maybe we should ask also, more a broader audience. I mean, isn't it a problem?
I mean, I chose to be unbanked for a while, but that was a choice, and that's very different. In the end, I completely agree that it's a whole bunch of rich white guys that are making more money out of making more money, right? But what's cool here is that we have the permissionless ability to create economies. And what I'm excited about is seeing people create their own economic systems. And if we have a lot of them, this is kind of to the question before, then it will be more robust. Because if there's an economic crisis in one of the 50 verticals of the economic system, it's not such a big deal because it doesn't affect everybody. But right now we have one giant economic system for everything. And it's all built on the one economy, and it doesn't have to be that way. And it's not going to be our place to design economies for people in South Africa. It's not going to work. In fact, that will never work. It has to be, maybe we can be advisors to the people that are on the ground building their own economic systems and their own tools that they need to solve their own problems. But that's the best that we can do, because otherwise it really won't work.
I think you said it all. Like we give to everyone tools, and then they can adapt it to the situation. Very good.
Of course. I mean, when you think about it, the only barrier to entry is just a smartphone. If you have a smartphone, imagine the power of all the tools you can access there. So unlike, like you said, like, rich people creating credit, I think the adoption here can happen much more easily. It's just a matter of building the right tools that can be for whatever use case that is the problem in whatever continent.
Yeah. I had a good thought, but it's gone now.
I mean, the creation of money is something that's pretty powerful, right? Like you had mentioned earlier, Deniz, how our small business, one of you guys mentioned how our small business is going to get loans. The only reason small businesses can get loans right now is because our economic systems inflate the currency and give them money out of their ass. They literally just print money and say, here's small business, here's some for you. Trust me, a bank wouldn't give an uncollateralized loan if they couldn't just make the money up and give it to you, right? They wouldn't do it. It's not in their best interest. But if they can do that and then charge at no cost to themselves, really, and then charge interest on top, now we have an incentive system for small businesses to get loans and for people to buy homes. And that's what inflating the Federal Reserve note, at least in the States, does, right? It creates an incentive for banks to support people to buy houses and start small businesses.
Mischa, do you remember what you wanted to say?
I do remember now. So, and you're definitely going to hate me for this one. So, I think this comes back to your final question, which you had in the doc, Pascal. I'm sorry if I'm jumping the gun, but in my head it was related. I think even if all we're doing is a bunch of Western white people making new financial systems and copying the old ones, I think, and obviously I'm biased and I'm going to say stuff like this, but I think power shakeup is good. And I know I have friends who don't use Facebook and tell me things like, well, Facebook's evil and Zuckerberg's an idiot, and now they've got, more power than anyone in the world. I think at the same time, Facebook has allowed interplanetary communication like no one else has. Yes, Facebook now controls the zeitgeist through its newsfeed algorithm of what people are thinking and what people are saying, insofar as that it changed political outcomes, arguably with Brexit and Cambridge Analytica and Trump and all this type of stuff. But that's been happening forever with newspapers. That's basically what newspapers do. And I think shaking up the old guard, bringing in some new ideas, can only be a good thing. And sure, we might be building, these Westerners building these systems, might be building the same systems which the banks are having. But I think a bunch of young people building it now, as opposed to a bunch of people building it 150 years ago, are going to bring fresh ideas to it. And insofar as it's really easy to slam Facebook, I think it's done something to the world which is different. And I think just power shakeup is good, and you have a new different set of people looking at it. And organizations now are less hierarchical, more flat. I think there's just lots of good there. And even if we replicated what our banks do right now on top of Ethereum, and sure, most of that innovation was done in the West because we have more resources and more time and more of a safety net to be able to take time to build these things. I think it can only be good for the world. But again, just being optimist and really biased.
Especially when everything's open source, right?
Yeah. Okay, guys, thanks a lot. I think we have overpassed a little bit, but we can because we are the last panel, so
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Pascal. It's great. Thanks for your opinion.
Man.
Thank you, guys.
Yeah, always a pleasure, guys.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.